So welcome to today's webinar about ArcGIS Insights and ArcGIS Dashboards. These are two similar looking apps, but have different uses and functionality. The Insights discussion will be the ArcGIS Dashboards will be more at an intermediate level, focusing on how to plan for and design for your dashboards. So let's jump right in and start with Insights. We start with a simple question. ArcGIS Insights focuses on simpler ways to work with your data and share results. This includes drag and drop analytics, on-the-fly filtering, aggregations, interactive visualizations, and fast and intuitive exploratory analysis. So where does ArcGIS Insights live, though? So ArcGIS Insights lives on ArcGIS Online as software as a service. It lives in your ArcGIS Enterprise, also known as Portal, on your infrastructure, and now also locally on your desktop. For any of these applications, you'll need to be assigned an ArcGIS Insights license by your administrator. If we were to sum up Insights in a single tagline, it would probably be powerful analysis made simple. Insights delivers analytical capabilities in many forms, such as Python, link analysis, predictive analytics, exploratory, statistical, and spatial analytics. And if Insights doesn't have that specific out of the toolbox you need, you can use Python and R integration to perform that specific operation, or do other things like data cleanup. The other huge part of Insights is that it allows you to combine your enterprise GIS data with data files and enterprise business data. That means all of the data that you need to work with can be in the same place. Other analytical packages don't treat spatial data the same way that we do. So we have all these great analysis capabilities where people at different skill levels can access Insights and access their data, whether it lives on the cloud, behind your firewall, or on the desktop. We're missing an important element though, the people. So one of the strengths of Insights is that it is usable across roles, titles, and skill levels. It empowers your entire organization with self-service location analytics. This self-service concept means that many GIS analysts and data requests can now be performed directly by the requester themselves. This allows the power GIS analysts to concentrate on other more strategic activities. Simply put, we're basically giving everyone a fishing pole instead of a fish. Self-service also means that capabilities scale with the analyst from basic to advanced. It's intuitive and familiar environment usable by all skill levels. We are bringing spatial analysis directly to all analysts instead of forcing them to come to a GIS paradigm. So what can Insights do? This is a bit of an eye chart here, but Insights is all, to understand what Insights looks like, you can visualize it this way using a typical cycle. So you start with data prep and geo-enablement. Then there's 3 different types of analysis you can run. And then you record that analysis and then finally share your results. Think of this as not an end-to-end process, but an iterative one. You may definitely find yourself bouncing between different analytical tools, geo-enablement, and data prep as you work inside the environment. So what does ArcGIS Insights look like? Well, if you used it before, you notice that this maybe looks a little bit new. And if you haven't used it at all, this is a fresh face for you. So a couple main elements about Insights is the data pane. The data pane is where all your data lives, or where you can access to data. Then the analysis is conducted on cards. So whenever you run something, a new card is created. Then we have the concept of a widget. These widgets allow you to filter or add additional media to your workbook. And there's also multiple pages, so you can do one set of analysis on one page and continue through on multiple pages. We've also redesigned the toolbar. So notice that a lot of the icons look similar to other ArcGIS products. You can access your data, you can create a map on the fly, charting, tables, and build relationships. You can also access the widgets, scripting tools, and base maps, along with the analysis view and the settings, all in a single toolbar. So we see what Insights is about, and we see what it looks like. Let's talk now getting into the actual working with Insights. So any type of data analytics has one main challenge in the beginning, and that is preparing the data. Data comes in many forms, and the formats are not always nice. Insights really can help on this end of things. In fact, it is really good at showing you deficiencies in your data and allowing the data to be more flexible as you work with it. We are a geospatial company, and we think to understand location is essential to understanding your data. So geo-enablement and data prep go hand in hand. As far as data prep goes, there are a few options that will help you clean up and prep the data for analysis, including calculating the new fields, hiding irrelevant fields, and joining data sets. And we'll see a couple of the more interesting parts of geo-enablement coming up. A powerful part of Insights is that you can use the data where it lives. You can, if that data lives on your machine, you can add the data from there. If it lives in your enterprise geodatabase, you can pull down those feature services. If it lives in a relational database, you can pull in those feature classes. You can also link it up with Python and R environments. And for most of these analysis and preparation steps, you can use that data right in the data pane without having to copy it to the workbook. However, there is a functionality that allows you to copy data to the workbook so that it can be shared. Before we get into some of the bells and whistles of Insights, I want to go through and talk about working with your data. So Insights works with data types in specific ways. You notice that each icon corresponds to a different data type. The type of data determines which actions are possible within Insights. So if you have a data type and you're trying to make a chart and it's not quite working, maybe check the data type on that. So in this case, so thinking about it like this way, these types can be changed. So if you have a numeric field, but you want it to work as a category, you can change that to a string. Insights also has a few ways to enable location. You're probably familiar with converting X, Ys using coordinates or geocoding addresses. But Insights has another capability that's I think is pretty neat, is that you can actually query the boundaries of another layer and establish location in a different layer. So in this case, if there are multiple state names, we could take state name and then the state geography and create location based on that. And Insights also has another powerful capability of combining multiple spatial fields into a single data set. So if you're working on the desktop, you're probably used to having a points layer and a polygons layer representing the same data. Inside Insights, you can just set 2 different spatial fields. So same data set, show me it as points, show me it as polygons. And frequently, data is missing stuff that could help analysis. There is a tool inside Insights called Enrich. And this allows you to add thousands of data attributes from over 130 countries directly to your data. Now, what if you wanted to work with 2 disparate data sets that have similar IDs or similar things? You want to connect them together. Through that is called creating a relationship. This is basically essentially joining data if you're a desktop person. So while they can be joined using spatial fields, you can also do a compound join by picking 2 identical columns. So in this case, we have total wildlife strikes by airport ID and then the sum of operations. So we want to combine these 2 things. Once you select those 2 things, Insights will try to make the connection for you. You can also edit that connection if you have something more specific in mind. Finally, you have different join types where you can take all the inner, the all, left or right, and you can look up what these mean online. But essentially, inner is just taking all the matches, and that's probably the most common one that you'll use. All right. So instead of me talking more about data preparation, I'm going to jump into Insights and show you some data preparation steps. So you notice that I've already added data to my Insights workbook, but I want to go through that quickly. So to add data to an Insights workbook, click on Add. And here it connects you to all your data that is available on your portal, all the organization's information as well. You can also upload a file right from your machine. It's drag and drop, or you can use the standard browse functionality. But most importantly, you have access to the entire Living Atlas. So all of those Living Atlas layers can help you with your analysis. Those are all available right here. So you just select one and add it. I've already uploaded a CSV, and this is roughly 400,000 bike share information pieces. So when a bike was rented, where it went, and all that kind of stuff. You also notice right here that I have a little cloud next to this icon. That means it came from the Living Atlas, and that's going to be a lot of data. So what I did here was I established some data filters first. So it's all interactive, so I selected my filter by the state, which is California, and then selected the 2 counties that I'm more interested in, and that would be Alameda and San Francisco. I hit apply. Then I wanted to make sure that I was just working with that data set, so I copied it to the workbook. And that gave me this data set right here. You'll notice that I have 2 different locations that are inside the CSV. I was able to do that by running the enable location tool. And then so I picked one start location, basically I had that, and then I'm thinking about building out a link map in the future, so I wanted to add an end location as well. So the same process, just picking start and end. And lastly, you see this enrich data set. So I ran a process called enrich that added these tapestry segments and total population, household, and household income to this data set here. I'm going to show you how to do that really quickly. So it all starts with this action button down here. This action button launches the kind of analytics you can do based on the data set that you have. I'll select enriching data and open the browser. Filter to United States, and these are all of the attributes that I can possibly add to my data set. I was interested in understanding who my users were and where they came from, so I'm going to use this tapestry data. I run the results, and I would get this resulting data set right here, which then allows me to symbolize by the tapestry segment. So my data is basically ready to go for analysis. But before I show you how to do that analysis, let's talk about some of the analysis things that you can do in Insights. Insights is really designed for exploratory analysis. It's all about looking at your data closely, testing it, experimenting with it, and discovering things within it. And because the interface is all interactive, you can decide what analysis you want to do. And if you don't like the results and you don't like how that turned out, you can just get rid of it and try it again. In the exploratory analysis realm, we have the creation of charts and tables and maps, and then also having the interactivity between these visualizations. And then also the ability to add the context from the Living Atlas. So just a few of the charts that you can make inside Insights. These are all built in. You don't have to load these at all. Based on your data types and based on what selections you make in the data pane, Insights will make suggestions of what kind of chart you should make. Similarly, it'll make suggestions based on location and kind of map you can make. So you can see a bunch of different ones. I especially want to point out the flow maps and the spider line map. So those are 2 of the newer versions, and also the binned mapping. But it also have the standard choropleth and then location maps. But I mentioned interactivity, and that's what makes Insights really powerful, is that I can have all these cards linked together. So when I make a selection on one card, the data will filter and change on all the other cards. So that makes my analysis a little bit easier to do and helps and aid in the exploring of the data. I want to take a moment to talk about tables. So in this case, we have 2 different types of tables. One is the data table. That shows you the entire data set. That is where you can calculate new fields. However, if you share the page, that data table is not accessible by your end user. The summary table is. So this allows you to extract significance from detailed data sets. It allows you to do the pivot charts and show descriptive statistics as well. It also interacts with the chart and map cards, and importantly, it is included with the shared page. So if you're looking to share a table, use a summary table. Some real-world examples of exploratory analysis. So in the upper right, there's a box plot showing outliers of water meters, and this was done to identify the dead meters. Or you could have a scatter plot for home assessment values to identify where houses need to be reassessed. And then a great visualization is the tree map, which allows you to show the most common types of government service requests. And this is simply an aggregation of your data in chart form. I think that exploratory analysis, spatial analysis, and statistical analysis all kind of go together. And when you're working with insights, you're going to kind of blur the lines between these two segments. But I especially want to cover right now the spatial and statistical analysis tools. So these types of tools are made for running something. So you're conducting a process on your data set, whether it is a regression, a link analysis, or trying to understand how things are distributed and related. Some of the spatial analysis techniques that we have, all access from that action button, are spatial filtering. I already showed you enriching data, spatial aggregation, and creating buffers and drive times. Some of the statistical analysis techniques are calculating percentage of change or z-scores, creating regression models, and then also viewing a link chart. A little known fact about Insights is that if you hit this info button, and the card will flip over and give you descriptive statistics on the card. So you can find out what that card has inside of it. So what are the means, the medians, the quantiles, and all that kind of stuff about your chart. You can get typical counts without having to understand the layer options. So these statistical descriptive statistics allow you to understand if your analysis a little bit better. And lastly, there's a Python and R integration, which allows you to connect your data where it lives. So whether it's in the R environment or the Python environment. It allows you to take open data science tools and perform that analysis inside Insights. Also, you can embed scripts into an Insights model. So I think that's probably enough of me talking about different kinds of analysis. I'm going to show you some of the types right now. So the first type of analysis I want to do is a spatial aggregation. Now I'm interested to know where my start locations are based on these tapestry segments. So what kind of user uses these bikes? So you can see that it's drag and drop. I'll select spatial aggregation. So on the fly, Insights is going to query the data. It's going to, based on the rental location, create some dots for me. But I don't really like how that looks out. So I'm going to be able to change that style. And so now I can see each tapestry segment and then just how many start locations and bikes were recorded in that segment. I also want to know a little bit more about my user. So I'm going to drag a user type in here. As far as user types go, there's only two types, but since they're in the same location, they appear on top of each other, which is definitely difficult for analysis. So I'm going to take that, and I am going to symbolize these by a pie. Let's think about its life for a little bit. Okay, so now we have a understanding of who our users are. Now I want to create some drive time analytics. So I'm going to take the rental start location and add it to a map. So based on my drive times, I can take these locations and say people that are going to borrow a bike probably aren't going to walk more than 2 minutes to get to that bike. I want them to be a nice area, so I'm going to run that together. Well, that's working. I'm going to also change the symbology. So you can do multiple things. You also notice that my maps are linked together. So as I change extent in one, it also changed in the other one. So let's shorten these up real quick while it's running. The last kind of map that I want to make is a link map. So I'm going to take the start location and the end location and drag them out into the map. There might be some internet issues here. Let's see if I can filter this out. So when we're done loading here, we should see a link map show up. And that's going to show us all of the connections, so between the starting point and the ending point. What I hope you get out of that is you can see that the analysis is really simple to do. You apply filters, you drag and drop data sets, you pick different attributes that you want to explore, and you just drag them into the Insights workbook, and you come up with different analysis tools. So moving on to the final section about Insights is the sharing of reports and models. So this allows you to, once you've conducted your analysis, share that with others. And you can record and repeat the analysis and also share those results pretty simply. What's the point of this? Well, the point of that is to maximize your work with others, and that you can share your results using the interactive cards and tell a story. You can share this with internal stakeholders or the public so they can do some of their own analysis if they wish. And also you can make sure that your analysis is repeatable and understandable and document your methodology. Analysis results are not necessarily correct unless they are repeatable. And also you can export the resultant data sets for use in different systems. Behind the scenes, Insights is keeping track of all of these choices that you have made to get to your final product. So now you can share this out as a documented and repeatable process. You can share it out as a model. So quickly going back into Insights, how do we get to the sharing? The sharing is down here, and you select Share As. You have a couple options. You give it a title. You can have different types. You can share it as a page, so just this Insights page. You can share it out as the model, so that was just this section here. So everything that we've did has been kept track of in Insights. And you have a couple options to share those. So I went through all that really quickly, but to boil down Insights into 5 main points is that you can combine spatial and non-spatial data in one view. You can add context to your data with new content. You can break down and explore large data sets into manageable questions. You can perform powerful analysis very simply by using drag and drop. And you can also use the intelligent visualization techniques to communicate the results. So with that, I'm going to open the line, more or less, for some ArcGIS Insights questions and answers.
Great, thanks, Matt. One of the questions that we had is, can you explain more the differences between the Arc Insights for desktop and the web version?
Yes, so the ArcGIS for Insights desktop version does computations in a slightly different way. So that uses your machine's power to do the computations, while the web version uses the server side. You will need to connect your desktop to a portal or an ArcGIS Online organization and have a license for it. What it doesn't allow you to do, though, is take insights offline. So you don't need to be connected to the internet. You just need to be signed in.
Great. And the last question, this seems to be fairly heavy on the data science. Is there any information to help us get spun up on that? Like
Yeah, so
learning
there's
resources? Oh, thanks.
so there's a bunch of different learn lessons on learn.arcgis.com to help you get started with insights and data science. But keep in mind, insights is pretty, while it looks heavy on data science, it's pretty easy to work with. So you may not totally understand all the z-scores and all that kind of stuff, but you know if your analysis looks good and it looks right. So you can drag and drop in that way. And then Google a little bit about what z-scores are if you're interested in a good time.
Thanks, Matt. That's it for questions.
All right. So moving on, we are going to talk about ArcGIS Dashboards, also known as Operations Dashboard. And this discussion will focus more on how to make your dashboard more effective. So we'll cover 4 main elements. So the patterns of use, the building blocks of the dashboard, design considerations, and then how to deploy dashboard elements effectively. So you'll notice that ArcGIS dashboards have a very similar style to Insights. They kind of have a big open space where you can add things to, but it's used for a different purpose. Essentially, it's an information product to present the location-based analytics that you've already done, rather than a place to conduct the analysis itself. A couple notes before we get started. I want to point out really quickly that great dashboards do not just happen. Sure, yes, it is possible to bust out a pretty good dashboard in about an hour, but to have a dashboard with staying power, it takes planning and consideration. And Stephen Few mentions in his white paper that despite their popularity, most dashboards live up to only a fraction of their potential, and they fail not because of poor technology, at least not primarily, but because of poor design. So that's what we're going to talk about right now: how to design your dashboard for maximum effectiveness. And you start by framing your challenge. So the challenge is, how do I configure this dashboard appropriately? Well, there's a couple of things you need to think about before you do that. First, you're being asked to communicate and share data in an effective and aesthetically pleasing manner. You need to balance the functionality of the dashboard with its usability. You also need to consider the user's end experience and also consider the end user's technical level. So pretty straightforward, right? You're being asked to do all that. And here's a diagram showing this. So the more usable something is, makes the objective a little bit tougher to do, and the more significant the experience. So you have to play this balance in this pyramid in your operations dashboard. So to help break that out, the first thing to think about your dashboard is the different patterns of use. So we see dashboards at the operational level. This one contains a lot of details and is sent out to operations staff, or operations staff is viewing it. So this is lots of gauges, charts, and maps. Similarly, you're at the tactical and analytical level. And it says analyze here, but this is more like viewing the analysis so that managers and analysts can make decisions using it. Then we're at the strategic level, where it's mostly monitoring. So executives are monitoring the dashboard, trying to figure out what they're going to do next, what their next move is. So the different functionalities and different personas, and you need to understand who your personas are and what functionality you're trying to achieve with your dashboard. Not shown in this diagram is informational. So these are public-facing dashboards, and they kind of fit more in that operational level. So a couple of notes on design theory and what makes all that important. Well, the first thing is, 2 of the most important characteristics of good design are discoverability and understanding. And to ask yourself the question, Is it possible for the user to figure out what they can do and where and how to do those actions? Then, is it possible for the user to understand how it should be used and what it means? We often see dashboards with too many controls and functions that users get overwhelmed. If you could please make sure that your phone is on mute, that would be very helpful. I also want to talk about the aesthetic usability effect. So this describes a paradox where people perceive more aesthetic designs as more intuitive. So think about this design theory element as you have two identical dashboards showing the exact same information, but one is arranged nicely with colors that look visually pleasing, and you have one that is kind of haphazard, different colors, different charts in different orders. So while they do essentially the same thing, the first dashboard, the one that is aesthetically pleasing, is going to be the one that's more usable. So it comes down to these 3 bullet points. Know your audience, express the information clearly and accurately, and focus attention where it is needed. So think about what questions are your users trying to answer. In what environments are they going to view the dashboard, and what is their technical level? Then expressing the information clearly and accurately comes down to legibility. So make sure the text is not too small and your numbers have context. And then this is probably the key to a dashboard. Focus attention where it is needed. If everything looks important, then nothing is important. It doesn't help you decipher what the actual necessary information is. So from a technology standpoint, where does that start? Well, that starts in the web map. So the web map sets the tone of the dashboard. Spend some time here to decide on the colors, the pop-ups, and which data and layers are important. Decide which data is important and exclude irrelevant data. Style your layers to convey meaning by leveraging Arcade and styling your symbology and your pop-ups. Set appropriate refresh on the layers. So if you're looking at a real-time dashboard, you want an appropriate refresh interval. And then select a base map that helps to highlight the data. Other options would be scale-dependent renderers or spatial bookmarks to help users navigate. So I'm going to jump into a little demonstration about how to configure your web map. So typical we see being put into a dashboard. So there's a bunch of dots on here. The pop-ups are just a list of attributes. There's not really a necessary way or ability to decipher what these dots are. So we can go from this dashboard or this web map to one that looks more like this. You notice that there's some color coding. The symbols are fading in and out based on something, and we'll discover that together. So the first thing to take a look at is that refresh interval, and that is here under options. It's simply a one-click refresh interval, and I wanted my layer to be refreshed every minute. Then the next step comes into symbolizing your layer. So having the points all be the same color and shape is not necessarily useful for visual analysis. So inside the symbology pane, you have a few options. So I'm showing an attribute called flag, but to make it more dynamic, I wanted to make sure that different colors and different countries and different things were standing out. So I'm focusing the attention just on these 5 items. So Chinese vessels, US vessels, Russian vessels, Iranian vessels, and then kind of everybody else. So I'm immediately making a decision on what I think is important. You notice this down here, hours from last report. So this is a way to control the transparency of a layer based on a attribution. And you can also use, this is our first spot where we're going to leverage some Arcade. So down in the transparency section, this is also often overlooked, but there's a per feature right here. And you can set your attribution. So you click on that. And you can pick any of the attributes, or you can make an expression. So editing that opens up the Arcade editor. And this is a really handy tool. One, it allows you to quickly write Arcade, and you'll see that Arcade looks a lot like JavaScript. But one of the benefits of Arcade is that it's all linked inside this builder. So if I have global variables and I want to select an attribute to count, I can just do it right in here. And so what we're doing here is saying I have a start date that's called the timestamp. I know the current date is now, and I want you to find in hours the difference between now and the timestamp, and then return that very nicely. The cool thing about Arcade is if you're like me and you have fat fingers and you may have messed something up in the script, you can hit this test button and it'll validate the results of your Arcade. So what we saw here is that I'm going to use some color. So high values, things that were a long time ago, I'm going to actually just filter those out. And so the newest things are going to be brighter and the older things are going to be lighter. Now when I click on one of these ships, you notice that my pop-up is nicely formatted. Kind of color coded to the ship. It has just the important information in it. And that is done by configuring your pop-ups. So a couple things that you need to be aware of is first, you need to change the display to a custom attribute display. And then you'll hit configure. And here's where you can build your pop-up. Over here is where you can add different field names to get those values. But you'll see they also have a few expressions in here. So I want to go through those first. So inside attribute, you can make attribute expressions. So if you want to combine attributes, come up with new information, you can do that right here. And you'll add one, but I have some other already built. So the first expression we're going to look at is a color code. So I wanted to just call out the 4 main ships that I was interested in and where they came from. So all I'm asking this to do is when I have a flag attribute with US in it, return this color code. And then same thing for IR, CN, and RU, and then everything else just return like that light purple. These hex codes you'll need to look up on the web, but they're pretty easy to just copy and paste. The second thing I wanted to do was instead of having it sailing under IR or a different letter combination, I wanted to be very explicit of where this is coming from. And on just those 4 interested locations. So I use the exact same expression, but I'm asking it to just return something else. So return, in this case, the text. So this expression is super flexible. You're basically giving it 2 main parameters. What am I looking for, and what do you want me to make it do? And Arcade is also very flexible. And so you know how you can combine things. If you're a scripter, you can combine different functions together. So while we had a function earlier, and this is doing the exact same thing, where I had 5 lines of code, you can boil down your Arcade into a single line of code. So we're doing the exact same thing, taking the date difference between now and the timestamp and rounding it and returning it in hours. Then configuring the attribute display, a little known fact about this is that you can actually combine HTML inside this little attribute display by clicking this source button. And if you're an HTML programmer, or you're interested in having more flexibility in what your pop-up looks like, dig into this HTML and try to understand this. So what we're doing is I'm saying that font color, remember that expression that I wrote before, just return a color? I'm putting that right here. Then I'm returning the expression 2, and then is the expression 3. So I was able to have this pop up nicely configured. So when I go into my dashboard, this is the pop-up that it looks like. All right, so that was configuring the web map, and it's a very important step. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on it. But now let's get into some of the more dynamic stuff about dashboards. So dashboard layout. The goal of your dashboard is not to see how many different ways you can display your data. I think that everyone needs to hear this, and I remind myself of it often when I'm building a dashboard. Keep the dashboard simple. Just answer the questions that people are asking to have answered. And there's a couple of design theory elements that support this idea. One is the flexibility usability trade-off. If you think about it, the more flexibility, the more controls, and the more actions that the dashboard can do, the more prepared that your user needs to be. So this pile of options can and will overwhelm a user, making the system essentially less usable while it can do more things. Adding in all those activity options makes your user make too many decisions. And so the time it takes to make the appropriate decision with the number and complexity of choices. So if you're looking to make a dashboard that's quick and you want to do the analysis quickly and you want to just see what you have very fast, having different displays makes that decision take too long. So it was explained to me in a way that I had to write it down. So a colleague of mine, Cade Beam, put it this way. He said, it's like In-N-Out Burger versus Cheesecake Factory. So at In-N-Out Burger, you have your cheeseburger, you have your double cheeseburger, hamburger, shakes, and fries. That's it. That's what you have. So you can make those choices. Then you go to Cheesecake Factory, they drop off a dictionary of 250 menu items, and there's at least 30 different kinds of cheesecake. So you'll obviously at In-N-Out Burger, fast food, you can pick your choice, you're done, you're in and out, as the name implies. And then Cheesecake Factory, you're gonna be there for a long time making decisions. I think this maybe is the most important design element, and that is the average person can only keep 7 ± 2 items in their working memory. So if you have a dashboard with 15, 16 different widgets on it, that's gonna be too much for them to analyze, but the average person anyway. So let's take a look at a example. So if you have a Fire Stick at home or a simple remote, this is not particularly flexible. It does one thing, but its usability is inherently very easy. I have 5, 6 buttons on this thing, and I can, do exactly what I need to do. Now, I wanted to add some more flexibility to that remote. So this is your pretty standard television remote. Its usability is a little bit more complicated. You have to understand a little bit more about what you're doing. And then finally, you come to the universal remote. It does everything. Right, so it's super flexible. You can point at stuff and it does everything. But look how many buttons are on that. So there's so many choices that the user needs to make about which button to press and what to do. And to compare that with dashboard examples, one, you have a very simple dashboard. Map, 2 charts, that's it. Nice, simple, that's what it's for. One a little bit more flexible with some more gauges and a map. And then you have one that has all the gauges and all the indicators. And while these are all perfectly great dashboards, you just need to understand your end user. So to boil down dashboard layouts, configure the dashboard to the audience's requirements, use the appropriate elements, provide contextual information, and use color to focus on certain data. So these are pretty straightforward talking points right here. Now, you're probably thinking, well, so you're saying that I need to make more than one dashboard. And yes, that's what I'm saying. But what if my user only wants to go to one URL? Well, there's a couple options for that as well. So one, you can contain your different dashboards in a story map. So each tab can be a different dashboard. You can have your dashboard be displayed on a web page. So each one of these links out to a different dashboard. Or super advanced, you can actually put your dashboards as embedded content elements, and you can have dashboards inside of dashboards, each representing a different tab. So there are plenty of options for you. You just need to know your end user's requirements and what you think they can handle. Let's talk a little bit about the availability of dashboard elements. So you see this list here, but the bottom line is, does a dashboard need to have all these elements? No, it doesn't. An effective dashboard is one that answers the question of your end user. So charts. Charts are probably the most common way to visualize data. And 65% of people are visual thinkers. So looking at these charts help people make decisions quicker. There are 2 main chart types in dashboards. One is the pie chart and one is the serial chart. The pie chart is meant to show part to whole relationships or for data composition. A serial chart is to compare things between different groups or track changes over time. So we see a pie chart element being used in a lot of dashboards. One thing I have to talk about is the different styles, and one is the donut versus pie. So the donut is the one with the hole in it, and this allows you to compare lengths of arcs and angles, or compare the lengths of arcs versus comparing angles and areas as a pie chart. So this type of chart allows you to make the analysis, make the decisions a lot quicker. Is easier on people's brains to understand which is bigger. Secondly, in a pie chart, remember that 7 plus or minus 2? In a pie chart, you really want to have 6 categories or less. Otherwise, the categories kind of skew themselves and you can't really see what's going on. You can see if you can combine the categories together to make 6 groups, or you maybe use a different type of chart. And then we see pie charts being used with a label and a legend. Pick one. I recommend using the label. That I feel like that makes the element look a lot more legible. Notes about the serial chart element. So always make sure that you are starting from 0. In this case, this chart starts at 1. So not particularly, could skew the results. Also, it has too many lines. You should use only 5 to 7 lines at most. And then removing these grid lines. So if you do have a few lines, 10 maybe, these grid lines can definitely skew the interpretation. And then use a scale bar when it's applicable. The indicator element. So this is where you really want to apply that using context. So performance indicators, great ones, are simple and they're easy to interpret. They have not just a number. So remember back to math class in high school where you need to have your units of that number. Without the units, it doesn't mean anything. So 86 is a number on dashboard. In this case, we can see that it's storm-related calls. Then do you want to show out of how many, or compared to what? What's the normal? So think about using your indicator and then think, well, do I want to do some additional stuff? And then is the gauge element better? So in a list element, well, it's really easy to list all the information. We spend all that time configuring the pop-ups, and we want to do the same thing here in this list element. Only show the important things. Which attributes are needed, which order, and how many features do you want to show in that list element. And then here's another place where you can also leverage HTML to help you format the appearance. Again, gauge element is very similar to that indicator element where you need to provide context and a unit of measure. So having just a gauge on there, looking at this one, this is 14.6% of what? It says overall percent satisfactory. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So this probably needs some additional context. You know, some of these have very good context over here. The next element is the embedded content element. So you can include web pages, video, and other apps along with social media content and additional context to your dashboard using this embedded content element. You can actually embed video. There's the code snippet. These slides will be sent out later. Not only that, but you can embed content from other ArcGIS apps. So if you say you wanted to have a dashboard that's connected to a survey, you can embed that survey directly in the dashboard. You can also use 3D web scenes and then other web app builder apps to enable editing and incorporate custom widget functionality. So one of the things that's asked for a lot is, can I export data from my dashboard? You would have to use an embedded content element using a web app to do that. Effective dashboards are interactive. So you have different events and actions, and they are defined. So it's able to configure and apply multiple filters to drill down on the data and set up attribute-based filters to show related records. So also that comes back to the flexibility usability trade-off. So the more map actions and the more interactive it is, the more difficult it may be for your end user. And the last element is the selectors and filters. So where should you put it? Think about the header or the side panel. If you only have a few choices, maybe pick the header. If you have a lot more choices, pick the side panel. What kind of filters are you going to have? Are they going to be buttons or drop downs? And then what actions? So once the filter hits, what is going to happen? Is it going to filter spatially or through an attribute? So boiling down these tips for visual elements into 3 takeaway points is: first, ensure they are legible. Then provide context to the data, and less is more. So make sure that your elements, people can read them, they're easy to understand. Then provide additional information to make those numbers mean something. And then Less is more, which means every element in your dashboard should serve a specific purpose. The last thing we're going to talk about before I jump into the final demo is the use of color. So everyone loves using color on their dashboards, but think these colors used in for these 5 purposes. So connect related data together across different elements. So if one variable is blue in one element, it should be blue in another element. You can also use it for branding purposes, evoking emotion, so in creating a captivating aesthetic, and then depending on how the dashboard is going to be used, you may pick a color palette that helps reduce eye strain or harshness in dim lighting environments. So tips for color visualizations, again, that 7 plus or minus 2. So if you need more than 7 colors in a chart, maybe using another chart type or grouping categories together or filtering out that chart. Use the same color for same variable. So the same variable should be the same color in each of your elements. Apply the appropriate contrast. Use colors that are intuitive, and in that, light colors generally mean a low value, and dark colors or dark saturation generally is a high value. So the last demonstration is going to be a dashboard optimization. So I have a dashboard that is pre-configured, and I just want to show you a few things that you can do with your dashboard. So one element we talked about was making your dashboard legible. So inside here, I have a bunch of different ship types. Well, I don't need all of these. So inside here, I can configure that. And what I'm going to do is create a statistic and add a sort. And then instead of showing all 16 categories, I'm just going to pick the top 5. And so now the number of shifts goes from the most number to the lowest number, thus making that chart much more legible. I can do the same thing down here. But one thing I want to show before we run out of time is the ability to stack elements. So keep in mind that's 7 plus or minus 2. If I'm trying to monitor all these ship types, there's no way that I can keep track of that all at the same time. So instead, what I can do is stack these together. So now I can just focus on which country I'm looking for, US ships, Russian ships, et cetera, et cetera. And then if I'm trying to keep like items together, I want to take this latest ship detection and stack it underneath. So now on one side of the dashboard, I have all of my statistics, so what types of ships I have, where they're coming from. Over here, I have my monitoring. And the last thing I wanted to show you is how to employ HTML to make this stand out. So again, remember, if everything looks important or nothing looks important, then you don't know what the actual necessary information is. And so the point of this dashboard is to understand the latest reports and understand where ships are. So to configure that, you're in this list element here. And remember how I talked about using that source thing inside the web map? It's also available here inside the widgets. And so you can add a bunch of different HTML code. Most of this stuff's already put in for you. And you notice that a lot of it is actually it's the same. So all this is formatted the same. So what you'll do is you'll add a new color style. So change it to black. And then this text is also available inside the PowerPoint as well. But you're going to basically add this text to it to make it stand out. And I chose yellow because yellow is a cautionary color. It draws your eye to it. So I understand this is the most important part of the information on this detected ship. So hopefully those few tips help you configure your dashboards for maximum effectiveness. I'm going to jump back into the slides real quick to show you where there is some help. So the ArcGIS Solutions team has released some industry template dashboards for your industries. It is at solutions.arcgis.com. These are pre-built templates where you would just add your own data to them. Secondly, if you're interested in more resources about building operations dashboards and finding other examples and help documentation, that is all available at these links here. that will be available as part of the slideshow presentation. But the operations dashboard help documentation is very robust and the product page as well. So I'm going to pause right here for any questions about operations dashboards.
Unmuted.
Thanks, Matt. One of the questions we had was about the embedded content widget. Can you briefly go over maybe what some of the limitations are or what kind of content's best for that?
Sure. So think of embedded content as a way to apply additional context to your dashboard. So if you're monitoring something, you can embed a web page about that, or you can embed scholarly articles. I've seen people embed some video. You can actually do live motion video inside of a dashboard as well. The limitations are really going to be the element's size and the resolution. So depending on the size of your video, is it appropriate, more or less? So is the video gonna be too small? And then some other limitations are embedding some YouTube videos.
All right, next question. Can map symbols and colors be linked to pie chart colors automatically?
No, they cannot. But if you have any ideas for enhancements, take a look at the GeoNet page and upvote those. So a lot of the suggestion has been mentioned a few times, and the more that we can get it in front of the production team, the more likely they'll be able to implement it.
Great. Next, can you compare the pros and cons of a shared page from Insights versus a dashboard?
Yes. So a shared page in Insights is if you're trying to enable someone to do their own analytics. You want them to kind of explore their own data sets and work with it on their own. So it's like a self-service type thing. In that, the Insights page won't be a static source, so they can change it around as they want. The dashboard is more for communicating analysis that's already completed. Sure, there's some exploratory abilities in it, but it's meant to remain highlighting the important parts. Also with the dashboard, if you have clicked through it and you come up with a result, you can't necessarily share that result as of yet. But in Insights, you could share those resulting data sets.
Another question that just popped up. Can you feed a dashboard with results from Insights?
That's a super question. I've never tried that, which is, I think, is an awesome idea. I imagine that you could use the embedded content widget to embed an Insights workbook page into a dashboard. Whoever's idea is amazing.
Great. I think with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you so much, everyone. I know that we had some audio issues, so thank you so much for keeping trying and getting in. We will send out the link for the recording and the slides as well. So thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.